welcome to another episode of the Innovation Lab podcast. And today, to talk about Socratic principles and leaderships in the business world, we have Sira Abenoza. So, you're a professor at Esade Business and Law School. You are also a visiting professor at the Jesuit University of Central America. And the most important thing and amazing thing, I would say, you're the founder of the Institute for Socratic Dialogue. So, welcome and thank you so much for being here.
I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, so to start off, would you like to say anything in particular you think the audience should know about your experience?
Well, basically my background or my past combines the world of philosophy and business. No, I studied both philosophy and business, and I consulted on corporate social responsibility for several businesses and governments. And this path, the intersection between the business world or management and philosophy, is what brought me to Socratic Dialogue and to exploring, let's say, environments in which I believe it should be applied.
Okay, that's amazing. And how did you come from business and consulting, you were saying, and then you were like, we can also apply philosophy and Socratic principles to the business world? How did you get to that conclusion?
Yeah, so on the one hand, it came from the field that I specialized in, which was as I finished my studies both in management and in philosophy, I was very early asked to teach at another university, because back then there were very few people specialized in corporate social responsibility, business ethics, etc. No, so I started teaching corporate social responsibility and business ethics very early, with, I'd say, carrying with me a desire that was born as I was studying, which was the desire to bring philosophy to management. So as I was a student and I attended management lessons and philosophy lessons, I couldn't stop thinking that it would be desirable for the future and for the world to have management students attend philosophy lessons, because management students are usually individuals who will have quite a bit of power in the future, but sometimes, or at least that was my case at the university where I studied, we're not always exposed, or management students are not always exposed to deep reflections, no? And for that, Bidlasi would be for sure an exception, but to deep reflections and to questions around justice, etc. So that's why I decided, or I thought it would be interesting to bring management students to philosophy classes. No, that's why when I was offered to teach business ethics, to me it was a great opportunity to make that idea or dream come true. No. And so I started teaching those courses on corporate social responsibility and business ethics. At the same time, I started consulting. I became a CSR consultant for companies like PwC, and which implied for both roles that I was telling both management students and managers that the way for them to become responsible managers, or for their organizations to become responsible organizations, was to be able to engage in dialogue with their stakeholders. So according to CSR theory, a responsible manager is a manager that doesn't make decisions only based on shareholders' interests, but is someone who decides based on the different stakeholders' interest. And for that manager to be aware of that, they would need to engage in dialogue with those stakeholders, no? And for several years, I was, let's say, preaching that, no? And both managers and management students seemed to agree. But then gradually, I came to realize that although they ideally or theoretically agreed with it, they were not able to put that into practice. And then I realized that it was because no one had ever taught them how to engage in dialogue with others, because the type of education that we have received is not very dialogical, no? Is an education or a management or a leadership style in which it has been more common to assume a theory of knowledge in which professors are the ones who hold the truth and instill it into students, or top managers know the truth or know the way and have to lead it for others, but don't have to listen to others, no? And so I would say that that mindset didn't allow for managers to be responsible in that sense, because they were not able, and they didn't know how to engage in dialogue with stakeholders. And when I realized about that, then I wondered, how could I teach them to engage in dialogue? And then that's when I went back to the father of Western philosophy, and how he philosophized, or the method that he used, which was dialogue. And then I did my PhD on that, and then developed a whole theory in terms of how Socratic dialogue could and should be applied to business organizations and business schools as well.
Okay, so kind of to clarify for, I think, the speakers, because I know we have class together, but why specifically go back to Socrates, and how does the principles that he talk about when he says dialogue, how do you think they differ, especially when you're engaging in the conversation itself, from, because we're talking right now, so and people talk all their lives, you learn how to speak and so on. What exactly makes Socrates be the one for you that's like, this is the person I have to listen to, and what does he say that differs from what is done most commonly?
So the reason why I thought it was worth looking back to him was, first of all, because he is our role model for dialogical philosophy. Most of the philosophers, or many of the philosophers who came after, developed philosophy by writing, which is more of an individualistic exercise, that is done in solitude, etc. Whereas for Socrates, what was relevant was not to write, but to engage in dialogue with others. So the method that he used was useful for this purpose that I had, as opposed to how, I don't know, Kant, Immanuel Kant made his philosophy. And then it wasn't only that he attributed so much importance to dialogue, but the fact that, one, as any philosopher, he thought that examining our lives and examining the world is very important, So he was, as any philosopher, a critical person, a person that enjoyed reflecting. But then at the same time, something that is very inspiring, I think, for us from Socrates, is the fact that he thought that any human being has knowledge inside of them, so has a partial vision of the truth, and therefore anyone's ideas, opinions, experiences is valuable for us to access the whole truth, if that exists. And therefore, that implies, if we assume, if we believe that idea, that implies that we should and we would want to listen to everyone. So if we incorporate that, we would call theory of knowledge, if we incorporate that idea that every human being has knowledge inside of them that is worth listening to, then that simple idea shifts, if we truly incorporate it, shifts how we look at others. Because suddenly, instead of maybe thinking that you have nothing to teach me, or you have nothing to share that I don't know of, it's the opposite. Not anyone I encounter will be an opportunity for me to learn. And this is, to me, the key departure point, that when extrapolated to anyone who has power, should transform the way they exert power, because it suddenly tells them that what they should do in order to be responsible professionals is to listen to others, no, and to ask others, because it's them who will enlighten their understanding of whatever matter they have at hand. No?
I understand, but it does sound like you're challenging a little the hierarchy, because you get a job and you're first of all looking for an internship, and then if you're hired, you're maybe in a small position, and then a junior, and then you start slowly scaling up. So you said you worked in corporate social responsibility. In all the parts of the company, like finance, that maybe they are obviously intertwined, but they are a different department. How do you try to make other people understand that it's not that hierarchy that we've been taught, and that just the CEO should sit down and talk with the trainee and be like, oh, what is your idea? How challenging has that been for you with other people who aren't maybe as knowledgeable with Socrates or even interested in philosophy?
It has for sure been challenging, because that's not how we've been taught. That's not how society in general functions. So it takes an effort. It takes the desire and the willingness to act against certain habits. No. For CSR managers, it is a skill that is very central to their role. A CSR manager or a sustainability manager, by definition, has to be able to engage in dialogue with the different business departments in order to transform them and make them more responsible or sustainable, and in order to align a business strategy towards responsible business or towards sustainability. No, you can call it whatever you prefer. So for CSR managers, I think it's in a way more obvious, no, because as they assume they took on their role, all the mantra about stakeholder dialogue was already there, no? But then for other C-level executives, no, or for other managers, it's not always so easy, no? It takes a while, and it takes effort. And what I find beautiful is that although what you encounter in general is managers who wouldn't practice that as a habit, as they take a course on Socratic Dialogue, and they realize that it is something that is useful, that will deepen the trust that other workers have in them and the company, that it will give more room to innovation, no? That it'll help prevent morally questionable decisions, etc., as they realize the positive impact and benefits that this management mindset can have. Then they start incorporating it, no? But for sure, it'll take a while. And where I find hope is that if we teach young students such as you, no, and other master students to incorporate that Socratic Dialogue mindset from the beginning, then what we see is that it is something that they practice since they start working, no, and once they get more responsibility, no, in their organizations, they practice that with their teams, no, and that step by step, gradually, slowly, I think provokes cultural changes, no? And not to speak about entrepreneurs who can decide to instill that culture from the beginning in their businesses. No?
And how does that look like in tangible terms? Because I know in class we sit down and we talk, but in a business, what does the finance director or the marketing director have to do so they're still keeping up with that productivity, but also engaging in dialogue? How can a business, whether it already exists or is just now starting to think of the business plan and the human resource strategy, incorporate dialogue as part of the business culture?
Mm-hmm. So it's something that needs to be ingrained in how we assume and understand our tasks, no? And that breaks certain habits or certain inertia. Every company and every professional finds different ways to put it into place, no? But the general idea is that one, I will probably need to create times and spaces for teams to have the chance to dialogue, because if not, it won't happen, no? So I need to make the explicit effort to say, I don't know, every Monday at 10 we gather together with our team to discuss openly about what's going on in the team, in the organization, in our job, etc. No, so it's growing that culture in which people, especially those that are in lower positions or that report to me, for them to feel they can speak up. Because what happens usually is that as we enter an organization, our superiors are those that we look up to understand what's the organizational culture. No, it's something that is not done consciously but intuitively. And if my managers, what I see in my managers is that they don't ask, they don't want to know from me, they make decisions without consulting, etc., then I'll learn subconsciously that that's what I'll have to do once I become a manager. No, if instead those managers acquire the habit of asking and sitting down and making people feel safe, that's something very relevant, no, in this organizational transformation. Psychological safety. We need to feel that we can say whatever because our managers will value our ideas, even if they bring some discomfort initially. No, there's been many business scandals related to a lack of dialogue and openness. I'll name one: Volkswagen scandal of CO2 emissions. No, when suddenly it was discovered that Volkswagen cars didn't comply with CO2 limits, and that the company had developed a system to fake that requirement. No, to pretend that that cars actually complied with that limitation. And as the case was explored, what came up was that no engineer had the courage to say, guys, we're lying. What we're saying is fake, and this is very risky because when we're caught, we'll have to pay a huge fine. No, but because the CEO back then was very authoritarian and would fire anyone who would question his ideas, suddenly he grew a culture in which no one would have the courage to speak up. No? Mm-hmm. If we grow the opposite, if we have a manager that is that is willing to listen to those, even to those that say things that are not necessarily nice to hear, then you'll be able to prevent this kind of situations.
And besides speaking up, the building of trust and of having conversations within the company, what else can you expect as a leader if you're effectively starting to have conversations and people are starting to feel involved and heard? In business term, is there anything that is improved besides, which I think is very important, obviously, how people feel in their jobs? Is there any impact you've seen throughout, well, your history working with Socratic principles?
So one dimension is how people feel, which is that they feel more safe and comfortable and identified with the organization. No, that's for sure one field. But then there are also, if you want, more business oriented dimensions that are positively impacted by this organizational shift, which is on the one hand innovation. If we want an innovative organization, we can not only rely on the two people in the innovation department. We need to grow an organization in which everyone is committed with innovation. And being committed with innovation means having people feel free to say whatever crazy idea they have, no? They need to feel comfortable with brainstorming, with questioning the way things are being done, etc. No, and that is something that is very much fed with the dialogical attitude. No, if the organization values any question that you might raise and any new idea that you might come up with, that will grow an innovative organization. No, so for innovation, which is something that is key, and this is obvious, which is something that is key in the 21st century, no, in a world that changes so fast, for us to grow innovative organizations, it'll be very important that people feel safe to talk, no, and have the time to talk and to share their ideas. It'll be also very important for moral accountability and to prevent ethical scandals. No, in a company in which we speak up, we prevent those situations in which are very common, and we can see many psychological experiments that have proven that. Oftentimes, when we behave badly, not always, but oftentimes, it has to do with us believing that others expect that from us, or that's the way to behave. Even if we don't feel right, or even if no one has explicitly told us that that's what we should do, we take that for granted because that's what we have in our heads that people or our managers expect from us. Once you create an organizational culture in which people don't assume but ask, then you suddenly open the door to people realizing that actually that's not what others expected from them, because misbehavior is usually not profitable at the end of the day, no? Because it implies risks, etc. And therefore, this organizational culture is very much aligned with risks prevention, mitigation, with reducing misbehaviors, ethical problems in the future that can end up becoming fines, advertising campaigns against our organization, etc. No?
Okay, so to begin wrapping up, just two final questions. The first one is, you were saying, Bitlasi is the exception. And I think we're very lucky to have you and to have this class. For all the people who are listening and who think that type of leadership resonates with what I want to accomplish, and I don't have this class, what is your advice? How can you move forward? What materials can you see? How can you implement these principles?
So I've just what first thing that comes to my mind is that we've just published a book that just came out in Routledge that is called Socratic Dialogue, Voicing Values, and it's precisely a book because many people approached us and asked us, how can I learn that if I cannot attend a course, no? And so we thought that it would be important to write a book, and it's a book that combines the let's say the main ideas behind the method that we use, but then also practical tips, both for potential professors or facilitators, but also for managers who want to implement Socratic dialogue spaces in their organizations or in their classrooms. So it's a practical book, let's say, that can help people who are interested in introducing that in their organizations, no? And it's the publishing house is Routledge. So that would be a way without needing to attend courses. Then for sure, coming to ESADE fortunately has introduced Socratic dialogue in many of its programs, and it's always been very successful. We teach it from the law school to the business school in different programs, graduate and undergraduate both. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you. And final question. You were saying that from Socrates, philosophy evolved. So what do you think changed, whether it was in philosophy or more on a social spectrum, that made us from having people who would just sit down and be like, oh, let's have a conversation, to the type of structure that we have today? What shifted, and how can we get this culture of sitting down and questioning and just having a conversation because we think it's nice to have conversations back to our everyday lives beyond business and the way we lead our companies or ourselves?
Well, many things have changed in this past 25 centuries, no? We're talking about long ago. One of them, and we shouldn't be naive about that, what we see in Socrates and his friends is what happened among free people in ancient Greece. And free people were men who had their material needs covered, no? So it was the opportunity to sit down and dialogue back in ancient Greece only belonged to a very small percentage of society. So we shouldn't be naive about that, no? Now, it is also true that these people who had time chose to spend a good amount of their time engaging in dialogue, no? So it's both. What has changed ever since? Well, social structures have changed a lot, no? Fortunately, the rights that that any human being has today are much better than the ones that most of the population had back then, no? We have democracies, we have thankfully middle class, no? And although there's a lot of poverty, but well, so from a material perspective, many things have changed. But what I find also relevant in terms of how it impacts how we engage with others is technology. I think social media has been very detrimental. Yeah, so yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's very much social media. I was going to talk about information in general, but it's very much social media. How social media has polarized societies and our discourse, because social media generally doesn't give room for grace, no, and for clarifications and for long explanations. Social media works with extremes, with provocation, with black and white, and that in a way pushes us to position us on one side or the other, and I don't think it trains us to follow this Socratic mindset of everyone is in a way right and everyone's opinion is worth listening to, no? So in that, social media has been terrible, no, in the impact that it has had in decreasing our willingness to to listen to those that think differently from us, no? But then also technology in general and how it has accelerated our lives, no? Urgency is detrimental to dialogue. Dialogue requires time, requires patience, dedication, full attention, and all those concepts are in a way opposite to technology, no? In many ways. So yeah, we have several challenges today that don't help us develop dialogue, and I think that's what makes it even more necessary, and required, because precisely because we have certain elements that push against that.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For explaining everything to us, and for this very interesting conversation and dialogue, as Socrates would call it. And hopefully everyone enjoyed it, and they will stay up to date with our podcast and watch the following episodes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriela.